Hey everybody, my name is SPAZ and I'm a CD Junkie. On today's episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to talk about one of America's finest power pop bands. That's right, I'm talking about Shoes. No, hello, stop. Wait. No, that's a picture of a Dutch band called The Shoes. Not the same thing. This is the American band by the name of Shoes. So let me bring their picture up instead. There we go. That's perfect. Shoes. How did I get into shoes? Usually with these CD Junkie videos, I like to sort of explain how I got into them. And it all boils down to the fact that my heart was broken. My first girlfriend, with her for 2.5 years or so, she dumped me. And that absolutely broke my heart. In fact, if you took my heart and you shook it, you would just hear shards of glass. I always found solace in listening to music. So one day I walk into Licorice Pizza, which was a chain of record stores down in Southern California. And I walked in, and up on the wall was a poster for this new band called Shoes and an album called Present Tense. Now, at that time, I was into all the new wave and punk and power pop bands. 2020, The Jam, The Clash, Undertones, Yachts, Buzzcocks, you name it, I was listening to it. And 79, I probably didn't have a job yet, so I had allowance, so I could only buy one album. So at that point, I took my allowance and I bought Shoes Present Tense, just because it looked like it might be a good album. I've always been that way, a look or a vibe that I get from an album cover, or maybe just one song, a snippet of a song, and I know that, okay, I have to investigate this. And of course, that's what I did. And I took it home, and these guys were singing my life. It was like, I don't want to get like weird obsessed fan, because I'm not, but it was like these guys knew what I was going through. But it was something, there was the joy and the sadness and the doubt. All these things about relationships came out in that music. I heard it. I connected with it. More so than, the Beatles or the Monkees. Because when I was a kid, I didn't understand emotion and I didn't understand what that kind of love was all about. So Shoes were really the first band that laid these lyrics on the line, and I totally understood where they were coming from. So, of course, right then and there, I became a huge fan. But before I continue, let's go back to Shoes' beginning. Basically, Gary Klebe and brothers John and Jeff Murphy formed Shoes. They were high school friends, wanted to form a band, and they chose the instrument they wanted to play, and they learned it, they reconvened, and they became what we now know as Shoes. Now, the first album was, I believe, an acetate only, so there was like only four made of an album called Heads or Tails. That was recorded in 74, I believe, came out in 75. I could be wrong on that, but I've maybe heard one or a couple tracks on that, and not much else. Then Gary Klebe went to school in Versailles, France. So that left John Murphy and Jeff Murphy twiddling their thumbs. So they decided to record an album, and they released that album, and it was called One in Versailles. Obviously, the album title is a reference to Gary Klebe. This was an album that was dedicated to him because he was their bandmate. This came out in 1976. Gary Klebe comes back from Versailles, France, and they get to recording an album. Now, these first two albums are very raw and very primitive. And the songwriting maturity, this is Bazooka. This also came out in 76, but this features John, Jeff, and Gary, and a drummer. So at this time, their songwriting hadn't really matured, and the songs were still hooky, but they were still goofy, still learning, still trying to find their own voice. And they found it in 1977 with the album Black Vinyl Shoes. That's the original album cover that they released it as. Does not look power pop, does it? Looks like if this was released today, it would be either some experimental weirdness or maybe some goth metal. But this is Shoes, Black Vinyl Shoes. Now, the album was re-released by PVC, and the cover looks like that, very similar to that. But this album here was really when it all came together. Not only were they much better songwriters and much better players, far more focused. The harmonies were really working together. They had gelled into something really special. And the thing about this album is recorded in a garage. It's very raw, very DIY, but the songs are just amazing. And because of the production value, because of the sound they get out of their guitars and the arrangements that have, it leaves a lot of, you know, empty spaces for your mind to fill in, but it's so atmospheric and emotional. The songs are just fantastic. This here version contains many bonus tracks, including their Bomb single and much more. But how do you get this? You know how you get this? And how do you get these two? Why, you order the Cherry Red box set right here, and this features all three of these plus a really nice booklet. And there you go there. And bonus tracks are included. I believe there's probably a track or two from Heads or Tails, that first album I was telling you about. The band released Black Vinyl Shoes on CD later on, and that was the cover there. Of course, it didn't have the autographs. This album, I believe, has probably been reissued 5, 6, 8 times. And I don't know how many album covers it's had. But Black Vinyl Shoes is just an amazing, wonderful, heartfelt record. Of course, the album I was talking about, Present Tense, it was their first album for a major label. Again, the songs are amazing. The harmonies are even more amazing. You know, the production working in England and you know, having the backing of a major record company. Just, this album is filled with so much heart and melodic sense that I can't believe that they didn't become huge with this album. It was absolutely stellar. Like I said, this is Present Tense right there. That's the album that I got hooked on. It's wonderful, and it's brilliant, and it's fabulous. It came out in 1979, and it was a perfect blend of both acoustic and electric. And they were much bigger in sound, but still the band's voice was coming out pure and true. Great songwriting. That was followed in 1980 by Tongue Twister, which was a much harder record. It's a record that I sometimes refer to as the chunk chunk record, because they had the sort of edgy guitar, which is like a chunk 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 chunk, and probably doesn't make sense to anybody else. But it's absolutely fabulous. It's wonderful. It's an album that, in my opinion, is equal to Present Tense in terms of the emotional power and the songwriting. But it's a different type of album. They'd actually moved on from the stuff that they had been recording before, and they wanted to sort of bring the rock back to their sound. This is both albums on one CD. Now, the great thing is a few years back, the band released Double Exposure. And what Double Exposure is, it's the demos for both of these albums. And the demos for some of these tracks sound like they could have come off Black Vinyl records from the same sessions. You know, there's still that, you know, lo-fi, raw, primitive recording, and not as well produced as this album, but they do have the same emotional impact. And there's some stuff here that didn't make either of these albums, so you may want to check that out. That's a really nice disc to add to your shoes collection. After Tongue Twister came Boomerang in 1982. Boomerang continued where Tongue Twister left off, maybe added a little more keyboard sound to it, but not much. It was still that great chunk chunk guitar sound that they had, but this was another great album. This CD actually also features a bonus live EP that was given away as a promo when Boomerang first came out. This is a lot of great songs, just direct, in-your-face, great power pop. If you're talking about power pop, just the edgier power pop, then Tongue Twister and Boomerang were perfect. They were fabulous. They were wonderful. Sadly enough, they didn't sell, so the band left the label. Drummer Skip Meyer left, and that left Gary, Jeff, and John to record Silhouette, which came out in 1984. Sad thing, the album didn't even come out in America at the time. It came out, I think, in France and Germany, a couple of different countries. And this found the band using drum machines and keyboards a lot more. It isn't as strong as the albums that came before it, but it continues that wonderful Shoes sound because their vocal blend is unique. And it is wonderful. When you hear Jeff singing lead, you can definitely tell the distinction between Gary and John's voices when they harmonize. And it's just absolutely wonderful. This is a Black Vinyl Records label version that contains bonus tracks. So a total of 15 tracks. Shoes Silhouette. Fabulous, fabulous album. Now, of course, we didn't hear from them for quite a while, but they did actually start setting up their Black Vinyl Records label again, and they released the first Shoes compilation called Shoes Best. You can see right there. But this was a great collection. Contained tracks from all of their albums to date so far. Well, actually from Black Vinyl Shoes onwards. It even included a new track called Love Is Like a Bullet, which was scheduled to be on the next album. And then in 1989, out comes a brand new album called Stolen Wishes. Again, fine collection of tracks. This finds the trio working with I think various drummers on this record. And it's a much more mature sound, a lot of layers. That's the thing, when they go into the studio, they just don't knock a 4-track out and release that. No, they add layers and layers, and then you have to mix that. So that's why it takes forever for Shoes albums to come out. But it's great because with Shoes, you always got 3 Gary songs, 3 John songs, 3 Jeff songs, and then maybe 1 or 2 that they all worked on together. But it was perfect because all 3 of them are very distinctly different songwriters and vocalists, and they're all 3 equally talented. But it's great to be able to experience new Shoes music as a fan. And then it took a long time. Propeller came out in 1994, and they actually, I believe, ended up touring for this album as well. But this was even heavier than Stolen Wishes. They were still power pop. They weren't veering towards metal. They weren't veering towards punk. But their production and the layers and the thought that went into every song made the songs heavier than, let's say, something like on Present Tense, which was still wonderfully produced, but a lot lighter and airier. These are a little darker, but still beautifully sung, beautifully played, beautifully written. There's so many great things happening on Shoes albums. But that is Propeller. In 1995, they released Fret Buzz, a live album, which I'm not a big fan of live albums, so I don't personally own a copy of that. 1997, they released the 2 CD set called As Is, very limited edition. It contained rarities, early tracks. A lot of that can be found in the Cherry Red box set now, but with As Is. But if you are a completist, you're going to want to own As Is. Now, in the meantime, by the way, Jeff Murphy did record solo. There was a Black Vinyl Records compilation called Yule Tunes. Jeff was in a duo called Nurk Twins. But Shoes did not put out a new album until 2012's Ignition, which this continues the trend of just very well produced, very well arranged, perfect sounding songs, great hooks, great harmonies. But I'd have to say that this is probably the best album since Boomerang. I mean, I really dig everything that they've put out, but I think consistency-wise, this is the best album they put out since Boomerang. And this is the album. It is called Ignition. Came out in 2012. One of the finest power pop bands ever in the entire history of the Evers. One more thing I want to show you is this, Shoes, this excellent compilation, 35 years, the definitive Shoes collection. And it is fantastic. It is wonderful. And I am a little biased because not only did I help the band choose the songs for the compilation, but I also wrote the liner notes, and they still have not forgiven me for it. But that is it. That is all that I have by Shoes. I wanted to focus on their releases, their studio releases. Hopefully John, Jeff, and Gary will get together real soon and put out a new Shoes album. I would recommend a side of Gary tracks, a side of John tracks, a side of Jeff tracks, and a side of collaborations between the three of them. So make it a 2-record album. Look, I'm not getting any younger, guys, so please. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this inspires you to go back and re-listen to your Shoes albums, or maybe go out and listen, go out and buy. That's the thing. Support artists. Buy physical product. So please support the industry, support your local stores, support the artists. But that is it. My name is SPAZ, and I'm a CD junkie.